Hi, my name is Abigail Williams, and I'm going to be talking about broken windows theory and fear. So in this presentation, I am hoping to answer the question, according to Kelling and Wilson, what is the role of fear in broken windows theory? So before we go over, I want to briefly discuss what we will be going over in this presentation, just so you have an idea. So we will be talking about what is broken windows theory, just so you have a basis in it. Then we will be talking about some real-world examples of broken windows theory. So we're going to talk about how New York first implemented it, and then we're also going to talk about some of the policies that came from broken windows theory, specifically the most controversial one. Then we're going to talk about fear's place in broken windows theory and what's its importance to the theory. And lastly, we're going to talk about if broken windows theory actually works. So what is broken windows theory? It is a criminology theory that was researched in the 60s by Philip Zimbardo. And then in 1982, Kelling and Wilson found this idea and decided to make it a criminology theory and published it in 1982. And that's how we have the theory we have now. So the study was done by Philip Zimbardo, and it was this study that he wanted to see the reaction between a suburb and a city. So what happened is he took a nice car, and he parked one in a suburb and he parked one in the city, and he watched it for days on end. Now, in both places, nothing really happened to it. But then he decided he wanted to see if he caused a little disorder to the car, if people would start also destroying the car and causing disorder to the car. So he decided to take a sledgehammer and he broke the front window of the car. And then he left and he continued to watch it. After the front window was broken in both areas, people went in and graffitied the car, stole from the car. And it happened in both areas. So in both areas, it was everyday people who were walking by the street who saw that this car was already broken, and that's the people who went in. In the suburb, people in suits went in and stole things from the car, broke windows in the car. In the city, it was just a person walking to their job. So it was he created this idea that if there is disorder, that it will lead to crime. Now, this theory took off in the 90s among cities, primarily in New York City. So it states that visible signs of crimes or civil disorder create an environment that encourages both minor and serious crime. So cities took this idea and ran, creating a bunch of zero tolerance policies from this theory, as many cities do when there's a new theory on crime. I'll explain one of these zero tolerance policies in detail later on, but these policies punished minor infractions very, very harshly. These infractions included things like graffiti, vandalism, vagrancy, panhandling, so on and so forth. So the idea was graffiti, vandalism, vagrancy, and panhandling create this environment where there's disorder or where it is not safe for people. So because it's quote unquote not safe, then there will be more crime in these areas. So the cities decided to punish these minor infractions very harshly to deter these minor crimes from happening so that major crimes wouldn't happen. So some real world examples is the subway system in New York. So you can see in the bottom that there is an image of what the subway system used to look like. And then up above you have what the subway system looks like now. So in the 90s, the subway system was considered really unsafe. No one wanted to take the subway. It wasn't a good method of transportation, and I'm putting those in quotes. that in quotes right there. So what New York City decided to do was fix the subway system. They repainted, they switched out the chairs, they replaced broken windows on the train, they made the platforms nice, they did all of this. And they did it in hopes of deterring crime. Well, it did deter crime. The crime left the subway system, but it left the subway system and went up above to where streets and alleys. It was no longer the subway system was the crime area. It was the streets that were. So how they maintained this was if train conductors saw graffiti or they saw broken windows or they saw trash, they would have to contact somebody, and within 24 hours, that would have to be fixed. And if it was not fixed, then they could be fined by the city. It has since then, it is not practiced anymore. They no longer have somebody, they no longer try to fix the area. And that is because of what has come out about broken windows theory. So now we're going to talk about a zero tolerance policy law that was created out of the broken windows theory. And that is stop and frisk. So a lot of people have heard of stop and frisk. And it is very, very controversial in some areas. So stop and frisk essentially is this idea there is people who will be walking down the streets and they look like they don't belong, like they may be committing graffiti or they may be committing vandalism, something like that. It was commonly used in the search of weapons. Now, the problem with stop and frisk was it targeted people of color way more than it targeted other people. So police would stop people of color and they would pat them down to see if they had any weapons or if they had any drugs on them. We now know that this is unconstitutional, but they would stop them and pat them down to make sure they weren't criminals. This was proven that it worked because of the crime rate in New York City. I will be talking about that in the last slide of if it works. So the reason this is considered a broken windows theory is because they were trying to stop minor crimes from happening. And in turn, we're trying to also stop major crimes from happening. So this is going to play into what is fear's place in broken windows. So fear is important for one big reason. It is thought if there is disorder, then people will be afraid. And when people are afraid, they don't believe in the social contract. And when people don't trust the social contract, more crimes are bound to happen. This is actually a really good image that helps show that fear is the basis of broken windows theory. If there is fear, then there will be crime in essence. If there's disorder, there will be fear, and then there will be crime. And that is fear's place in broken windows theory. It has a very big role. And I know I keep stressing that, but it is really important to understand. So now I'm going to talk if broken windows theory actually works. So there is new evidence stating that it is not a valid theory, that it may have some truth to it, but new studies are coming out saying that isn't a lot of evidence backing it up. So, for example, there was a study done by Northwestern students who were looking at this very question, but they had added an ending to it of, does disorder affect people's health, the public's health? Um, and the Northwestern students found that disorder does not lead to crime, and that it also does not lead to public health crises. So, essentially proving Kelling and Wilson wrong in their study. And then the second thing that is starting to show that broken windows theory isn't needs more study behind it is that people are attributing to the drop in crime in New York City to that of stop and frisk. It turns out you can see in the image to the left that crime rates were dropping all over the United States. Chicago, Dallas, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and San Diego didn't have stop and frisk policies, yet their crime rates were dropping, just like New York City's crime rates. And it was happening all over the United States, in big cities and small cities. So it wasn't stop and frisk, this zero tolerance policy law that came from broken windows theory, that was stopping crime. It was something else that was stopping crime, something we still don't understand. So in conclusion, in this presentation, we talked about what broken windows theory is. We gave some real world examples of the subway system in New York City and a zero tolerance policy, stop and frisk. And then we talked about fear's place in broken windows theory and how it is almost the basis of crime, because if there's disorder, there is fear, and then there is crime. And we also talked if broken windows theory is a valid theory. And we're seeing now that there is having to be more research into broken windows theory and if it actually works. So thank you, and thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a great day or a great night whenever you're listening to this.